Hello. Let me get this streaming, and I want to make sure that it actually works. So I'm going to try a different method here. Oh, whoops. Actually, dang it. No, try that again. All right, we are live to YouTube. Hello, everyone. So let me just get some things in the right spot here, and then we can get going. Let me copy the link to this and notify office hours. Okay, cool. And I'll go to my office hours thing. Oh, and I want to give them the Zoom link also. Okay. And let's share my screen, because that is a thing that we do during office hours. All right. Hi, everyone. So office hours is your opportunity to ask me any questions that you want. And I don't promise to answer all of them, but you can ask me anything you like. Yeah, I just do my best to answer the questions that you have. So feel free to ask. I give preference to those who are actually in the Zoom call. But then if we run out of questions in there, which we often do, then I am happy to answer questions from Discord. So go ahead and jump in Discord if you want to be able to answer questions there. Looks like YouTube chat is enabled. I think that's just the default for live streams from Zoom, which is a crying shame. So I'm gonna go disable those really quick. Okay, no, I want this to go away. I'm not here to do this. For crying out loud, no, go away. What is this? I just want to go to the manage page. What? Okay, sure. Okay, now life is good. Okay, let me just get this live chat disabled. See, it's unchecked. See, they need to use XState or something, because yeah, that is incorrect. And I can't click save on any of this. Like, what the heck is that all about? If I do a refresh, see, the reason that I have to do this, YouTube folks, is because I had some racist jerk make 1 billion YouTube accounts, and so I couldn't ban them fast enough. They just kept on saying really mean things. So we've got to disable this so that we don't have mean people saying mean things. Try this again. See, the save button doesn't pop up. What the heck is with that? All right, so those of you who are on the live stream, I can't make this work because YouTube is just not working for me. So please don't be a jerk in the comments. Okay, I'm not even going to look at them anyway, so it doesn't matter. I am just going to be looking at Discord. So if you want to have a useful conversation, then join the Discord. And if you want to do one even better, then join the Zoom chat and we can chat in here. So with all that intro, what can I help people with?
Hey, Kent.
Hello there.
Hey, this is Zhenghao. How are you?
Good. How are you, Zhenhao?
Yeah, yeah, I'm great. So I have a question is regarding a particular usage of a hooks. Is that a hook that returns function that generates or returns a React component? And I described that question in the Discord channel.
Yes.
Yes. It can, sorry, yeah, it can take a bit of time to read through
Sure.
it, but I made a demo for it. So
yeah, I'll pull that up also. Yeah, so this is a great question. Here it's a function you call render modal, and then that will render some stuff. It's a pattern that works. There are just a few things to think about when you're doing stuff like this. So, oh wow, this is fancy. This is like, is this your actual project that you're working on?
This is actually our code base, but I kind of simplify it and reduce it to like a example. So
I see. Wow, that took a lot of work to get this all going. Cool. Okay, so where is the code that I'm looking for in
so
here?
the relevant part is really just the the action helper library.
Okay.
And there is so you see there is a render friction model, and so this is the thing that is returned by the hook that is generating the model. And yeah,
Okay, and where are these item actions coming from?
it's coming from, so this whole thing is like a third is like a helper library that we're trying to build at our company to make other developers easier to build these models. So yeah, for some reason the page, the screen on the
The preview?
yeah, the preview. So if you can quickly just create something like, sorry, yeah, just type something and hit create.
Okay,
And yeah,
cool.
so if you click on it and you click on either archive or delete. Yeah, so this is the model that pops up, and that is model generated by the hooks, the function returned by the hooks. And so the whole file, the action helper library, the whole file is like a package that we're trying to build. That is, so there are, so they're using these hooks to make people can use the hooks to generate these models really quickly.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just curious how this is typically expected to be used. I'd like to see
Okay, so
usage of this.
yeah, so if you look at actions, yeah, so these are the file, these are the code that the users or the other developers has to write to be able to use this hook. So you have to define action. So action is like a bulk action that you can perform on the items in the table. So in this case, it's delete or archive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so the delete or archive is like the action ID, and in action ID we use React query. So yes.
I see. Okay. Um, yeah, and then this generate modal is just a little helper function
Yeah,
for where is that? Yeah, generate modal right here.
it's return a risk model, and risk model is a wrapper around a model component.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. So one thing that is particularly like one concrete downside I can think of this approach is if you look at moderate risk model, this component, yes, in the same file.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah, moderate. Yeah, so you see this, the handle submit handler. Oh, sorry, the unsettle handler, which is destructured from the React query helper, right? So is after in that it says close model. So the user actually have no control over when to close the model or open the model. Like, so this is all controlled by this library. So what if there's an error happens and the errors are triable? So in that case, you actually don't want to close the model. You want to maybe show an inline alert within that model. So
Mm-hmm.
that makes it impossible, because once the promise is resolved, either it's reject or successfully resolved, the model is going to close. So that's one downside we currently have with this approach. Um,
Yeah, so that one downside is a symptom of a deeper problem that I see with this, in that um, it's too much of an abstraction,
mhm.
and it results in being too tightly coupled to the original use case that it was written for. And this is a very natural thing to happen. So yeah, basically, you build an abstraction for a specific use case, and the reason you're building it is because you know you're going to have a lot of similar use cases in the future, but you don't. It's impossible to know what the actual future use cases will be like, and so the abstraction you build is not well suited for anything but the original thing you built it for. And so and then on top of that, it becomes really easy to start layering different things, different use cases, and it just makes things really complex. So what I would recommend is, rather than going with this API, or its actions, with this API, where here we're calling this generate modal, that's a pretty complicated API, or like I have to understand what the heck this thing is doing. See, this doesn't even give me insight into what this
Yeah.
friction
Yeah.
modal is supposed to
Yeah,
be.
this is kind of misleading. The name it suggests it's a model, but it's not. It's actually something else. Sorry. Go ahead.
Right, yeah. So that's another thing. But like really what this function is doing is not all that much. So it doesn't give you a whole lot of value just having this function in the first place. All that it's doing is it's obfuscating what this actually does. But even more than that, I I would prefer getting out of using this hook for this stuff, and instead use components for this. So I sort of have a similar situation. It's not doing as much, but I think you could extrapolate this
Yeah.
in the bookshelf app. I don't know if you've gone through this material yet or not.
Oh yeah. I haven't, because I halfway through Epic. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So once you get to, I think it's, yeah, exercise 8, compound components,
Mm-hmm.
then you'll see how, like, you'll build this with me.
Mm-hmm.
But our modal abstraction that we build in here is like pretty simple. There's not a whole lot to it, and yours is clearly doing a lot more than this is. Like, so it's not really an apples to oranges comparison. But I think that you should be able to extrapolate from this into what
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to accomplish,
Mm-hmm.
where the end result is you just render React elements and just have these different components that people render themselves, and it makes should hopefully make it easier for you to have the flexibility that you're looking for, where you're like, well, we have this unsettled, and right now it's closing, but we have no other way to have people do
Mm-hmm.
things differently or whatever. You should be able to have the flexibility for people to do that in a very natural way,
Mm-hmm.
but also be able to abstract the amount that you need for this to be really useful for people. So this is the approach that I would take. I typically recommend against having hooks render UI in general. If you do want to do that, then the Advanced React Patterns workshop also shows the prop getters and prop setter, or prop collections and prop getters
Yeah.
patterns, which might also be relevant for some of this. But I'm guessing that you're probably going to be just solid with compound components for this.
Yeah. So can I ask a question? So have you ever seen this usage of hooks that is, as you said, hooks responsible for also for rendering UI in any open source project, or have you ever used this before?
I have seen this, and I remember toying around with it, but I never went forward with it, and I can't think of any open source project that follows this pattern. Um, yeah, no, I can't think of anything that does this.
Okay.
Now, let me think. I could see that's not to say that it's not um, a reasonable pattern that some people might like. I don't like it myself, but I think that there's a way to do this and still be and still like
Mhm.
have it work uh, pretty well. But this abstraction in particular, I think is a little too heavy, and I would switch it for So like, I understand the position that you're in. This is what I did at PayPal. Is I was the engineer that built abstractions that other people would use so they could move faster, and that's what it sounds like you're trying to build, is like just something so other people don't have to think about building modals. They just use the abstraction and then move on with their stuff.
Yeah.
And that's like, you know, that's a good thing to do. And finding the right abstraction is always the tricky thing. So
Yeah. Definitely.
um, I think that if you start by doing less for them, or let me say that differently, if you start by requiring them to do more,
Yeah.
then you'll be better off. So like I understand that you want to say, hey, look, there are just like 3 things you have to do, and then you're off to the races and it's fine. But it's what I find interesting is the less that they have to do, the more they have to work around.
Yeah.
And so it just forced them to do a little bit extra.
Yeah.
And then the nice thing about the way that hooks and components work is that you can actually, once you've required them to do some extra work, you can find the common things that they're all doing and build little miniature abstractions for each one of those things. And that's actually one thing that we do in the when we talk about compound components in here, is we start out by making this modal contents, which is actually the modal content space. This is all that it does. And then we find out that, oh, well, it's really common to have a circle close button and, you know, a title and stuff. And so we'll build an additional abstraction. Then you'll have 2. So people who don't want all of that extra stuff can use the base. And people who are like, I'm building a regular modal, I'll just use this. And you can compose these things on top of each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way forward. So do less for them, make them do more. And then over time, you'll find different things that are common enough that you can abstract even further, and provide both. And I think that's a good pathway to success here.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I know the compound component panel. I mean, I'm a big fan of your stuff. So I mean, so this code is actually written by someone who's like way senior than me, or I mean, like who have way more experience than me and my team.
I
So
can tell.
yeah, yeah. So I was, yeah,
It
I was,
looks like something a senior engineer would build.
yeah, totally. So yeah, so I was trying to, because I was also wondering if there is any like performance issues with this hook render components approach. It doesn't look right to me, but I mean, it works. So I cannot come up with a better one, but I've been
Yeah,
trying
yeah.
to, yeah.
And to be clear, when I said I can tell, I mean that a senior engineer would be the natural type of person to try and build a really hairy abstraction like this. I don't think that this is a good abstraction, to be clear. So yeah, as far as performance, I don't think that I don't see anything that's shouting out a performance problem at me. It just looks like a bunch of
Mhm.
lines of code calling functions and stuff, which is, you know, that's whatever, it's fine.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, there's nothing in here that looks particularly like a performance problem. It's mostly a maintainability problem at this
yeah.
point.
Okay, yeah, for sure. It is. Yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. Yeah. So sorry, I actually have a second question, but it's really, really closely related to this performance, maybe the potential performance issue with hooks.
Mm,
And so I described that question in the Discord. So it's below this question. And you can just click on the code sandbox stuff. Uh yeah. So
okay.
yeah, so this is the hook which returns, a legit React component, or another one is React element. And the component that is returned has performance issues, as Dan pointed out, but the React element is fine.
Right.
Yeah. So I
So
wonder. So yeah, I was curious, like, what's the difference here? So it's all render the span foo, but one is, is a component, one is just a JSS markup. Um,
yeah, yeah. So I can explain this. We can actually we can make this one just as bad as this one by adding a key prop to this that's generated every time, but we can talk about that later.
Okay.
The reason that this is not okay is because it's going to get unmounted and remounted every time. And maybe you understand some of this already, and I'll just say it for the benefit of everybody watching as well. But what's going on here is every single time we increment the counter, this app is going to be re-rendered because we're doing a state update. We need to re-render it so that React can get the new JSX or the React elements that need to be displayed to the page based on the state update. Now, the only thing that needs to actually re-render is this count. Everything else stays the same, but React can't know that's all that matters. There's nothing built into React to know that. So it re-renders the whole component for that benefit. As a side effect of rendering the whole component or calling this whole function, it has to call this use foo function again, which is going to come into here. That's just JavaScript. There's nothing about React about that. We're just calling this function. And when this function is called, we're going to create this function called foo. So when we create that function, then we're going to come back down into here and we're going to render this. And this is going to be a React create element foo. So we're going to create a React element. The template we're going to use is this foo component type. It's a component function. So we're going to create a element of type foo, and we're going to render that. So that works fine on the initial render. And every time we re-render, if we're going to create an element with the exact same type as before, then we'll then React knows that, oh, this is the same type. I'll just pass it the new props or whatever. I'll just call into that same function. The problem is that because we're re-rendering this, we're recalling this, and we're creating this function component within the function body of our hook, we're actually creating a new type. So we had foo originally, and now we created a new foo. So every render, this function is brand new. And because of that, when we come back down here to say, hey, React, I need to create an element. Here's the blueprint. This is the type. React looks at it and says, oh, that's interesting that these functions both have the same name, but they're absolutely 100% different functions. So I have to unmount the old one and mount the new one. And that's why it's a performance problem. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. So yeah, that's the crux of it. So there are a couple of ways to solve this. For simple cases like this, it's actually really easy. You just move it out, right? But the reason that you want to do this is because you're like, oh, well, I'm taking some options in here and I want to pass those options, whatever the case may be. So assuming that you want to keep it inside of the hook, there are a couple other things that you can do. Now, first, before I go into that, I just want to mention that I can't think of a very good use case for doing this. I can, sorry, let me say that differently. I can understand why somebody might want to do this, but I can think of other patterns that are better, that solve the same problem better. And compound components is actually the best pattern for solving this problem. But anyway, assuming that this is the direction you want to go, the way that we can optimize this is use use memo. Or actually, I guess we could say use callback. Just to save ourselves an arrow function there. And then we provide our dependencies, which of course here we have no dependencies, but if we did have some options, here, let's just add some, an option here. We're going to say ID thing. Here we go. So now we have a dependency. So now the performance problem goes away. It's just fine. So technically use callback. They could throw this away in the future. They don't right now, but you'll see in the docs, use memo and use callback. It says it should not be a semantic guarantee that these functions are never called. And that's probably fine. It won't make an impact. It certainly doesn't make an impact today because I don't think that they do that right now. But even if they do add that ability to throw away the memoized version and create it anew later, that it should probably still be fine. Like regardless, the only time they would do that is if they thought it would actually improve performance, and so it wouldn't make a difference. But yeah, that's the way you'd solve this this sort of thing. But again, I wouldn't go with that approach.
Yeah. Do you see, like, so would you see this is like an anti-pattern for using hooks? Because I can, so normally use foo, it will have its own state, right? It can, inside use foo, it can have use its own use state, and you can pass the set state, the state updater, pass that through the, you can return that, and you destructure that in app component, then you can have control over the child component's state. That kind of breaks the, the one way data flow in React, right?
Yeah. Well, so I think that like the desired outcome of something like this is you have your use state and you're managing some state here.
Yeah.
And set state, sorry. Okay, and so then you want to share that with this component, and then you just export this, and now that component state is being managed totally, and invisible to the user of the hook. They don't realize that the state's actually being managed within the hook. That actually is fine. This is one of the nice things about components and black box. You just put all the abstraction in this box and you move it around, and that works fine.
Yeah.
This is implicit state sharing that we enjoy from compound components and stuff. So that aspect of it is fine. I just find that this pattern is confusing at best, and what's the word I was looking for? Complicated at worst. So what I would do instead is I just create a provider component and then a bunch of other consumer components and say render this provider and render these consumers. And the API looks very natural. Like pretty much all of Reach UI is built with this sort of pattern in mind. Like the accordion here, we have our provider component and then our consumer components, and it's that implicit state sharing is actually quite nice. So the pattern itself, I don't think that it's an anti-pattern necessarily. It's just kind of awkward and confusing.
But I mean, what if you return set state, and you get that set state in app, then you can set the state directly in app, right? That breaks the one way data flow, right? So
yeah, I can see. I can see what you mean. So now I can call this, and that would impact this child component.
yeah, because normally you wouldn't have control over the child's internal state, right?
Yeah. So I think I'll push back on that idea a little bit as well. So I think it's a trade-off is what we're talking about. So I can appreciate how that could break encapsulation because now I have control over the child state. And so basically what I've done when I do this is I am now exposing the internal state of this component to users of the component. And I think that's fine so long as you acknowledge that is what you're doing. So it's and this is a pattern that I've followed for a very long time in downshift. So I introduced this. This is what we do with the state reducer as well as control props, actually, as we expose the internal state to users and give them a huge amount of control. This ends up working out really nice. It's a really powerful feature, but it does end up, it puts a lot of power in the hands of the users, which is a double-edged sword. They could put the component in a really bad state if they're not careful.
Ken, I've actually used this particular pattern at work with some of my custom hooks, just because there was no way to do like lifted state between two components normally. And so what I ended up doing was just kind of like a custom hook that you could pass down like a set state, and then I was lifting the state into that custom hook instead.
Yeah, I think that's probably fine. So anyway, does that kind of help?
Yeah, totally. So I was just curious. So I watched like halfway through the Epic React courses and I don't remember you ever mentioned one-way data flow in React. Is that something that you think is irrelevant?
Oh no, I guess it's something I take for granted.
Okay, so it's okay. So you don't have to explicitly mention that.
Yeah, because it's kind of natural. We do have that one in the fundamentals where we talk about lifting and co-locating state.
Yeah.
Where is that? Is that in this one? Actually, I think it's in the next one.
Yeah, I think it's in next one.
But yeah, anyway.
I watched that. So
yeah, so I guess I kind of take it for granted. That's the curse of knowledge. I probably should mention that explicitly because I know a lot of people are coming from two-way data binding frameworks and stuff. So yeah, I'll think about doing something about that.
Throw it into fundamentals or
Yeah.
introduction.
Yeah, and that could even be like an article that I reference. I don't know if I can make an exercise about that. But it definitely could be an article. Like we kind of get into that in the forms where we control the input value. So here's where we start using state. And if we jump ahead here, yeah. So here we're doing one-way data flow, sort of. We're like this is the point where people who are used to two-way data binding would be like, oh man, that's a lot of work, because they bind things together and they update it and it magically updates and whatever. They don't have to think about calling some function. They just set some variable and all of a sudden everything's updated. So I suppose this would be a good place to mention that. We could probably, I could write an article about this and then just link to it in the description of this one. That would probably be sufficient. But anyway.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so really quick, I'm taking care of the kids this morning because we might have COVID. So my kids are doing school at home, and so we've got two little kids who are not in school, and my wife is taking care of the other two. So I'll be right back. Just need to check on something, and then we can get to the next question from somebody who's in here, or we'll just check on Discord. So I'll be right back. All right, I overestimated the when I needed to turn on the next Octonauts. So we've got 6 more minutes on this on this one. Okay, anybody else in the Zoom who has a question?
Hi, Kent.
Hi, James.
This is James, and this is my first testing experience.
Welcome.
I have two questions.
Cool.
We use jest.mock function instead of a spy on with the ES6 module import environment, right?
Uh-huh.
And I wonder why does not monkey patching work in ES6 module environment. And I quite can understand how require statement works, but quite confused with ES6 module statement and how it internally works.
Yeah, and you're talking about testing JavaScript specifically, like some of the examples I've got in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let me see. Here's the repo for this, so we can all make sure we're on the same page here. So if we go the no framework version, and we're doing the monkey patching right there. That's the first exercise here where we say monkey patching is fine. And then we go to the spy. Yeah, it's really confusing looking at this stuff all by itself. But yeah, oh man, this is kind of fun. We can build this. Yeah, so what we're doing right here is we switch to spy on. Well, hold on. I think I'm let me
maybe we use jest.mock function at the last lecture of JS mocking fundamentals.
Yeah, let me right here. Okay, here's where we need to talk. So when I'm teaching this, I'm saying, okay, so we're gonna assign get winner to this just mock function, and then in the next video, if I recall, this has been a while since I record those, but in the next video, I say, hey, we're gonna switch this to use just.spy on because this monkey patching stuff technically doesn't work with ES modules. Is that what you're asking about?
Quite different. I
Okay.
think justif we use a spy on instead of justifin because we don't have to create an original getWinner variable. And I wonder, not the just.fn function, but the just.mock function.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's the next thing with this one, or the one as a separate. We'll just pull them up.
Yeah, that's right.
This one. Yeah. And so you're, oh, I see. Now I think I understand. So you're wondering how the heck does this work with ES modules? Is that right?
Yeah, and I remember that you said monkey patching doesn't work with the required statement. Only works with the required statement.
Yes. Okay.
Not in the ES6 import statement.
Yes. Okay. That now it's all coming together. So, yeah, what we're doing right here is a form of monkey patching. We're just saying, hey, let's grab this this thing. We'll override its getWinner and assign it to something else. Technically, that's what's happening here as well. The spy on the way that it's implemented. We're basically doing monkey patching. Here we're just replacing the module itself. So that's this is not monkey patching anymore, and this is one. So monkey patching technically works with ES modules. If you were to do this in Jest right now, if we switch this to use import statements, then this would actually still work. It would work, but it only works because of the way that ES modules are compiled. So right now, I'm not aware of any Jest environment that actually runs with the real modules in place. It's all going to be compiled. So with that thought, let me go take care of my kids. I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, technically you can actually do monkey patching, and it's because all of your ES modules are going to be compiled to CommonJS. So and so then from there, monkey patching just works fine. But technically, doing this reassignment is a syntax error, and I don't know. Maybe we can make that syntax error happen in the Babel REPL. I kind of doubt it, but let's just see. Actually, it'd be more likely to happen or to go wrong in the testing or the TypeScript REPL. So let's see if we can. Where's the? Try it in your browser. There we go. So if we try import star as utils from utils, we say utils.foo equals whatever. This should be a syntax error, but we're getting a here. Let's try this. FS. No, rats. we're getting other errors, but yeah, you probably should get a syntax error because you cannot reassign a namespace, a property on a namespace, and that's what we're doing when we do this. And that's what I mean when I say monkey patching won't work with ES modules. So it technically works because of the way that things work under the hood. It gets compiled to CommonJS, but according to the spec, this should not be allowed. And so that's why going with the mock function like this is you're better off doing that. And
Understood. And the second question is that what's the general use case? I mean, do we simply use just the mock or just using spy on? What's the general use case?
yeah. So
Juicy patching and just on mock with ES.
So the typical use case, I don't actually use monkey patching a whole lot. I don't do this sort of thing a whole lot. The only reason that I taught you how to do this in testing JavaScript was so that we could work our way to what we end up with at the end of it. Like I wanted to introduce the jest function API to you because we do actually use that right here as well. And just mock functions in general. We use those a lot, but I don't typically go with this sort of monkey patching. As far as like using spy on, I use this for spying on console methods all the time. So like, just spy on console error, and I'll mock the implementation to do nothing because I'm expecting an error, but I don't want to have errors printed out. And I think that I don't remember, but I think we showed that in one of the modules in testing JavaScript. I actually do that. And I also use this for mocking browser APIs like the navigator, get geolocation or something like that.
So you're saying generally just mocking the entire module instead of monkey patching, something like that.
Yeah, and in fact, the default behavior of jest.mock is to take the module that you're mocking, get all of the functions that it exports, and turn those into mock functions. And so that's actually typically how I operate with the mocks that I make. Is I'll just mock the module, and then within each individual test, I'll call mock implementation. To specify for this test, this function will operate in this way.
Well, you really help. Thanks.
Yeah, sure thing, James. Thanks for the question. All right, who's next? Anybody else in the Zoom call?
Yeah, I semi-answered a question that's in the Discord chat.
Awesome. I'll keep that in mind when I get to that question. I'm gonna start from the top as far as the Discord chat goes, unless somebody has another question.
Oh boy, I didn't realize there were so many.
Yeah, we got plenty. Okay, so assuming that if you're in the Zoom, then feel free to interrupt me as I go, but I'm just gonna go from top to bottom in here. So Vasily has just been super helpful. Left so much feedback in the performance and suspense workshops. And yeah, just really awesome. Really appreciate you. Thank you. I got a couple questions here. So let's grab those. This is in the React suspense cache resources. Let's go take a look at that really quick. Cache resources. The final extra credit adds a cache timeout. Oh, yes, that's right. I remember this. So the question was, I have this other implementation. Why is, or like, does this implementation work? What should I think about? And it does technically work, except for a couple of situations. So let me just get over to that React suspense, so I can show what my solution looks like and compare with the suggested solution here. So this is exercise 4, last extra credit, final 4, extra 3. Okay, so just to be clear with what's going on, we have this context cache here where I can go back and forth between these. But then after a certain amount of, this is just like, hey, let's think about cache invalidation and like getting rid of these things that are in the cache so that we don't have a memory leak. And there are so many different ways and approaches to doing this. But here's one approach. And my approach was a timeout. So we just, after 5 seconds, then we remove it from the cache. So here now, if I go, now it's been 5 seconds. So if I go to Pikachu, then we are going to load again. Okay. So the way that this works is kind of complicated. So just watch the video to get an idea of how it works. But there's one thing in particular about the way that this works that differs from the solution that Vasily has for us here. So I'll show Vasily's solution here. Basically, when we get a Pokemon resource, we need to get it from the cache if it's in there. So we're going to grab it from the cache. And if it's not in there, then we're going to set a timeout to get it removed from the cache after a certain amount of time. Okay. And like otherwise we won't do that, and we'll just grab it from the cache and return that. So this works fine. Here's the problem. If I come over here and I say, hey, we're going to go to Charizard, that's not going to be in the cache anymore. Pikachu won't be anymore either. But now we're going to go back and forth between these two. And you'll notice that even after 5 seconds, they're still here in the cache. They're not loading forever. I could just keep going like this forever. And the reason that this works is because of the way that I've done my solution. And this is the thing that will not work for Vasily's solution. Okay, so why will this not work for Vasily's solution? Right here, we have this set timeout, and there's no way to cancel that timeout. So what I'm doing is I'm saying, I want this to be removed from the cache after 5 seconds of it not being accessed. Okay, what this is showing is I want it to be removed from the cache after 5 seconds of the time it was inserted. That's the difference. And I don't know if I have too much more to say about that, but does anybody on the Zoom call have follow-up questions about it? Okay, whether or not you totally understand it is a different matter. Like if you've watched it, watch the video and you understand my solution, then then this should make sense. And if that doesn't make sense, then come back to office hours and I'll explain it. But yeah, this should make sense to you if you've watched this, watch me create this solution. So anyway, you can take a screenshot of the code and you can probably understand it. But basically, yeah. That's the difference in answer to Vasily's question. Okay, cool. So now, coming back here, if we can find, oh, I was there, right there. Okay. In the styles exercise instructions, after developing, oh, right. So this is comparing CSS-in-JS over CSS and SCSS modules. Yeah, lots of benefits. I've used CSS modules before. I used it with Stylus because I'm a big Stylus nerd. I think Stylus was underrated. It was very, very good. And SCSS was not as good, but still quite good. It just got to be more popular. But yeah, so. If you're happy with CSS modules, then keep at it. Here's the thing that I really like about CSS-in-JS. I really like that I have the ability to write my styles in within JavaScript. I just think that this comes back down to co-location and how much I appreciate and love co-location. I can put these styles right over here. I can give them a variable name that makes sense. Or I can not give them any variable name at all. This is actually one of the really nice things about CSS and JS in general, is just the ability to use the CSS prop that Emotion has to offer, which means I don't have to name my styles. So, for example, I can style this div, and it can have a hot pink background and everything. If I were to use CSS modules or literally anything else, I would have to come up with a name for this div. And what would you call this? I don't even know what you would call this. I mean, it's pretty contrived, but once you have to start naming every single thing you're going to style, then you start coming up with names like wrapper and container, and I hate that. And CSS modules really helps with this because it takes things out of the global namespace and just makes it specific to this one module, which is really nice. I like that a lot. And then it also makes it so that the connection is statically analyzable, which is also quite nice. But you still have to come up with a name, and I don't like making names. This is why I really like the CSS prop. And also actually why I like the atomic CSS approach of like Tailwind CSS and whatever. I like that, or the utility first, as they call it. I think that makes a lot of sense, and helps me have to think of names for all sorts of things. And it's not just names, but that's like one of the big differences. Outside of that, another nice thing is because it's in JavaScript, TypeScript, or my ESLint plugin or whatever can tell me if a set of styles is not being used, so I can remove it. I'm safe to remove it. I don't have to worry about whether I can remove it. Once you put things in a CSS file, you don't quite get that guarantee. Even with CSS modules, CSS modules is definitely better than just regular CSS. Now, all of that said, I'm actually really impressed by what Remix can do for me from a styling standpoint. Oh yeah, I'm signed in. Let's see if I go to Remix. Whoop. They have a blog. Let's see if we can find it. Explore features. Oh, fancy. I've never even saw this. CSS. Yeah, the refreshing take on CSS. They've got a blog post about this. Maybe it's, I think it's blog. Here we go. CSS. Nope. Man, it must have been an email newsletter that they sent about it. But anyway, I like their approach to CSS, where it's actually just a regular CSS file with some light post CSS things applied on top of it. But then each file is loaded and unloaded based on the route, and it supports nested routing. Really interesting level of CSS fanciness there. So anyway, hopefully that sort of gives a bit of insight into the way that I think about styling. I really like CSS-in-JS and just the ability to not have to name things and to just throw some CSS onto something. But yeah, your mileage may vary. Okay. Learning accessibility. So Raphael gave a bit of an answer to this. I can't speak to this first one. I'm sure it's fine. I listened to this episode and it was great. Marcy's awesome. And yeah, as far as other resources, I believe that React training, training, online course from like literally React training is what I'm looking for. You've got to be joking. Online courses. Here we go. I think it's their React hooks. Here, let's view all the online. Yeah, there we go. React catch. No, that's not it. Accessibility. A11Y. Nope. I feel like there's one of these that talks about accessibility. Maybe this one. No. Oh, maybe it was this one. Huh, maybe not. Oh, hold on. Yeah, I can't remember. I'm eventually planning on adding accessibility training to Epic React, but I don't have that right now. And I don't know of any solid resources beyond, w3.org that can give you that. Hopefully Raphael's suggestions are useful to you. Sorry. Okay, so I think that I already answered Jinhao's question here and there. So we're down here to Albert. Okay, cool. So this is a pretty common question of what do we do when we have side effects that trigger other side effects and stuff like that. In general, so I'm going to look at the specific example here in just a sec, but I just want to say in general, this is not really necessary in my mind. If you have one side effect that triggers another one, then it's quite possible that they should just be a single side effect. But there is value in separating concerns. And there is certainly situations where, here's a great example. Let's say that I'm building Twitter, and I have one side effect that goes and fetches all the tweets, and then another side effect that updates the document title. So fetching the tweets is going to update some state. That's going to impact the dependencies for updating the document title, which will trigger this one to run. So like, it's totally a reasonable thing to do. But when you're thinking about, should I combine these or should they be separate? Sorry, I just noticed this is off center. Whether you should combine them or keep them separate, it comes down to separation of concerns. What is the concern? And keep those things separate. So anyway, coming down to the specific example, yeah, so effects are chained in order to make sure the component state is fully updated before doing the fetch. I see. Okay. So when the market ID changes, we're going to set the keyword to null and set pagination to 1. So that's interesting. Actually, you wouldn't need to bother with this technically. I mean, yeah, actually you do, because if you don't set these both, then this will trigger a re-render that will call this before you get a chance to set the pagination one. So forget that. This is probably fine. Yeah, I think this is fine. I'm trying to think of what the concerns are here. So we have one thing that is responsible for fetching data when the pagination state changes. We have another thing that's responsible for updating the pagination based on the keyword. So when the keyword changes, we need, if the keyword ever changes, then we need to go to pagination page 1, right? So that makes sense. And then we have another concern that says if the market ID changes, that's like a whole different thing. So we're going to get rid of the keyword, we'll get rid of the pagination, we'll start from scratch. That's the concern for this one. I think that's reasonable. Yeah, I don't think that there's any real problem with this. Just the thing that you need to consider when you're, this is sort of synchronizing state, sort of. It's not actually, because things will fall out of sync, right? If we update yeah, I guess the keyword. Yeah, so like if this is, it's not exactly synchronizing state because we can update the keyword without updating the market ID, for example. But anyway, I think this is fine. Yeah, I don't really see any problem with this. So yeah, thanks Albert for making that like a legit example. It's much easier to talk about examples because really it comes down to think about what the concerns are, combine things that are of the same concern, separate things that are of different concerns. I think, and now I'm trying to think like, could you do this in a single use effect? I don't know if you could reasonably do this in a single use effect because here you want to see if the market ID changes. And if you put this inside of here, then you'd have to track the market ID yourself. So I think it makes sense to have these as separate things. Cool. Thanks for that question. Okay. So Vasily's got another question. Oh, yes. So here, this is code from the Bookshelf app, the auth context. So auth context.js. Here we go. So right here, I've got a couple of utility functions that I make available in my auth provider. So we have login, register, and logout. Something that's interesting is that login and register both call their respective authentication functions. And once those are finished, then we update our local state. However, with logout, I call the logout function, which is asynchronous, but then I just ignore it. I ignore that promise that's returned, and I immediately update the state. And Vasili's argument is we could fall out of state. We could end up with inconsistencies in our application by not waiting for the logout operation to happen. So this is a valid concern. And I don't have a super great answer for it. I think that switching to this form is would be a reasonable solution to this. I guess the reason that I wrote it this way is because I know that auth logout actually doesn't do anything other than remove some local storage stuff. Or if it's your auth provider, it would delete a key or something, or a cookie. And so chances of that failing are non-existent. That will, or very unlikely, I suppose. And I just want to make sure that we, like, when somebody wants to log out, they just want everything gone. But I can see there's a potential risk of clearing out all the user state and everything, but not actually successfully clearing out their login information. And so if they actually hit refresh, they're actually still logged in, which would be bad. So yeah, I don't have a good answer for you. I think that yours is probably better. That's probably a better solution. And then just make sure that you show the user a notification in the event that there is a problem logging them out. Yeah, that's one thing you really don't want to have a problem with, though. Like if this fails, that's not good. So I guess I was just so confident that that would not fail that I didn't really stop to consider the inconsistency, I guess. So good question. That's very interesting. Okay, cool. Where are we? I just answered. Well, we're 2 minutes over, but I did take a break really briefly. So I will see if I can wrap up the last couple questions here. Oh, right. I don't know if I'll have time for this one or not. This one, I think, is rather large. Okay, let's see. Here, let's do this. We'll put it in prettier, just so I can get some syntax highlighting. Okay, so the question specifically is, I'm trying to set some head stuff for server side using helmet, which is very common. The script has the edge side included, is not parsing correctly. So I don't have very much experience with helmet, so I may not be able to help you a whole lot, but I'll try. Has the edge side include? I don't know what that means. I'm guessing that's what this is. So this is not parsing correctly. Yeah. So I don't know what this is. I'm guessing that, oh, whoops. I'm guessing this is some sort of server-side template language. ESI include, edge side include. Interesting. So this is something with Fastly. Oh, it's a web standard. I was unaware of this web standard. Huh, that's interesting. Uh-huh. Yep, that's interesting. Well, that's fascinating. Yeah, okay. Okay, so what are you trying to edge side include? Looks like some sort of SD version thing. So, yeah, so this is not parsing correctly. I think that sounds like, well, let's see. Do you describe what it's parsing to? Yeah, not parsing correctly. That doesn't give me enough information to know what it could be. So I'm sorry. And I don't have any experience with this edge side include stuff. But it seems interesting. I feel like it should work. But I don't know. Without seeing what it's doing, I don't know what it is doing wrong. So sorry. Okay. Let's come down to here. Oh man, we got lots of stuff. Okay. I think that sounds great, Freddie. I think it's just a trade-off, and it sounds like you're acknowledging both sides of the trade-off there, where you've decided that it's better to have have the whole app break rather than have just part of the app break and potentially be in a bad state. I would push back a little bit for different UI elements, like if you have a chat widget down here, if that breaks, do you really want your whole app to break? Maybe what about like the notifications, if you got notifications, or the left nav or something? Like maybe they don't care about those features or whatever. So it is just a trade-off. But if you're confident in your support's ability to handle those types of questions, then maybe that's fine. But I think a lot of people would prefer to be able to use the part of the app that's not broken. Now, it is a reasonable argument to say if one part of the app is broken, then it's possible that the whole app is in a bad state. That's possible. Yeah, that's just my thoughts on that. Okay. The blinking COVID icon next. Yeah, so this is RunCat actually. That's funny. It is kind of looks like COVID, but it's a reactor, but I could do slime. It's RunCat is fun. Go check out my uses page. It's kind of fun. Okay. Yeah, so the question about yeah, so Ariel, the question really here. Oh, great. Thanks, Jacob, for answering this. Let me just take a look at your answer really quick. Yes, Jacob is correct. And I'll back up Jacob's answer. Let's just make sure that no additional content was in there. Okay, so I'm just going to make a quick sandbox to demonstrate. So let's say we have this function, or let's see, React use effect, and we'll console log. That's going to be our side effect, is to console log cool state. And here's our state. We'll just do a count, I guess. For goodness sake, this is why I have the counter, so I can do this really quickly. Okay, so we'll just grab all of this. And move that up, get rid of that. Okay, cool. So we've got this cool state, and every time I click this, we're going to get that cool state incrementing, okay? Just because we're logging the same thing. So now if I want to actually log out the count, now I'm going to see that incrementing 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? But if I don't include that in my dependency array, then here, let's clear that out. Then I'm not going to get those logged because I need to make sure. Oh, and actually, no, you're talking about like closures and stuff. So let's well, this very similar similar problem. So I'll wrap this up and then talk about like use callback and stuff. But because I haven't listed my dependencies in here, React has no way of knowing when this callback function should be called again. And even if it were to call it again, the count here would be the count at the time that the function was created. So let's take this step further with like a React use callback. So in fact, we can actually continue with this example and say, here's my log count function. Okay, so it's a function that I call log count there. Okay, so we're going to do that as a side effect. Yeah, let's just have this happen every time. Okay, so now we no longer have dependency array. This will run every time, doesn't matter. And now I'll clear this out. We'll see that it's incrementing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so that's working fine. Now let's say there's a reason, a good reason that you want to memoize this. Maybe you do want to put it in the dependency array somewhere or something. But in any case, we want to memoize this. So we're going to say React use callback. And we need to put our dependency list in here. So if I put count in there, then you'll notice that it does increment properly. But what you're saying is, why do I have to include this? I don't think that I should, right? Or you just want to understand why you do. So let me just do a quick refresh here. So we'll get a, oh goodness gracious. Okay, so we get a log, cool state 0. That makes sense. But when I increment it, you'll notice that I actually am getting another log, but it's still saying cool state 0. Every time I click on this, it's going to say my state of count is 0. So this is the problem. It actually comes down to memoization, the way that memoization works. And I just wrote a blog post last weekend, articles, here we go, about memoization and React. So I'll share that with you all. And this will explain it a little bit deeper, or just maybe in a different way that might help make sense. But what's going on here is when we call React use callback, React says, oh, okay, so you want me to take this first callback that you provide and return that one, that specific callback every time we hit this line of code until the dependencies change. Okay, so every time app runs, we are still creating this callback function. So here, let's do log count callback. We'll just refactor this a little bit. This is a straight up refactor. There's zero behavioral change at all in what we just did. Now we just have a variable. So we are creating this function every time we render. No, we can't get around that. But we're passing it to use callback, and that's going to return us a specific instance of this, this function that we've created. And it will return us the same instance that we created the first render until the dependencies change. Now, because we haven't specified our dependencies in this array here, that means we're always going to get the first function that was created. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense so far, because it's really important to understand in the next part here. Because our log count function is going to be the exact same one that was created on our first render, then all of the variables inside of this closure are going to reference what those values were, or what those variables were, those pointers, those bindings of variable bindings. It will be what those were at that time that this function was created. So the count that this is referencing is always going to be 0. When we re-render, we're going to create a new variable binding. So every render, we make new variable bindings to new values. And so this is why the dependency array is so important, is because we need to get the latest version of this callback function that points to a version of count that is the latest version. Okay, so we're creating this function every time, but we're only using the function that was created the first time because we have no dependencies. Now, if we add the dependency, now we're going to be using the version that was created when count was last updated. And so we're going to have the latest version of the count variable. Hopefully that helps clear some things up. And hopefully the blog post helps as well.
Ken, so
Yeah.
I think part of the question there was that why isn't essentially the closure of these functions able to, like, quote unquote observe the change of those variables?
Yeah, and the reason is because the variables aren't changing. Thanks for mentioning that. So the variables are not changing. We're actually creating two different variables. So on this first render, we have one count. And then when we trigger this re-render right here, we're going to call this function all over again. And so now we're creating a new variable, brand new variable, totally different, new variable. We now have a count that is 0 and a count that is 1. We re-render again. Now we have another count that is 2, and so on and so forth. So every time you render, you're creating all these variables brand new. They're totally new variables. And so because of that fact of JavaScript and the way that closures work, you need to have those dependencies. And this is why I recommend being strategic about where you apply these optimizations, because otherwise like you could end up with stale closures, or even if you are taking care of your dependencies, that just adds complexity that most of the time you don't really need. Like you often only need these sorts of optimizations in like special hooks, like one-off hooks. Your day-to-day function components don't really need these sorts of optimizations. Like if this is really what I wanted to do, then I would simply just stick this right there and I get rid of all of this. Don't need to do any of that. Like that's dead easy. And the only thing I may want to put in there is my count. And that's like, I don't know, that seems pretty easy to me. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. Hopefully that was helpful. Okay, cool. So we are almost, which YouTube channel am I streaming on? Oh, great. Am I streaming on my, crap. That's why I had that thing at the beginning where it's like, hey, let's show you around this thing. Gosh, dang it. I think what I'm going to do is I'll download the video when we're all done and I'll upload it to my regular channel. Don't subscribe to that other channel. That's just like my personal channel. I put like personal videos. They're all private anyway. I think there are a couple of public videos that you can go watch, I guess. Oh, silly me. Okay. Yes, actually, I noticed you posting this, and I was hoping somebody else would jump in. I'm not sure why this is happening. I'm guessing it has something to do with the latest version of Jest. I have seen stuff like this, and I have no idea why this happens. I would open an issue on Jest probably. I think so. Here, let's go to ESLint config. Can't see odds. And if we go to the Jest config right here, what this is doing is it's setting Jest globals true, which is actually, this is built into ESLint. Jest globals true. Maybe. Yeah, so right here, the docs. So what's possible is that the ESLint plugin Jest is not getting installed for you. That's my guess. And maybe that's my fault. No, that's in the package.json. So so this should be installed automatically. You shouldn't have to install it manually. So my next guess is it's possible that you are using an old version of NPM, I suppose, that isn't deduping dependencies and putting everything at a flat module. But the solution, an easy solution, would be to install this. So here, I'll just actually, oh, figured it out. Yeah, let me quote this just to make sure that this individual sees this answer. Try installing that. That should install automatically, but maybe it didn't. Okay, cool. Oh yes, Ronnie, I remember your question here. This one will be fun. Definitely worth going like way over my normal office hours time on this one. Okay, So we've got scroll to the top, scroll to the bottom, scroll to the top, scroll down, scroll to the top again. Okay, so this is the non-declarative method that is my solution. Okay, so we actually need this to be in two separate components for this to work out. So I'm actually going to just go to the repo for this, advanced React hooks. And the reason that it needs to be in two separate components for this to work out is because if you have it in one component, then there's not really any good reason to like add all of the complexity of refs and stuff. But yeah, for two separate ones, absolutely. Let's take a look. It is, yeah, exercise 5, but we'll look at my final version. And looks like I've already got the remix blog running. It never stops running. I need to figure out what's wrong with this. Okay. Let's just open that on an isolated page. So you have scroll to top, scroll to bottom, and the solution that Ronnie suggested, which I think is probably in here. Yeah, oh, that's right. We just saw diffs. So the solution, well, I'll just show you how we can change this to a declarative API. So the imperative API is using use imperative handle. This is like one of the very few situations where use imperative handle makes sense to me. But yeah, if we wanted to have a declarative API for this message display, so we don't have to call this ref nonsense and all that. So yeah, I don't want to make a ref. I don't want to have this ref be like this. Instead, what I want is to manage some state so that I can make this be a declarative API. So scroll position. So we'll set that scroll position. We'll have this initialized to null, I guess. And then we'll pass this scroll position. Okay, so this is not going to be pretty, by the way. I should preface all of this by saying the imperative API I think is more straightforward, but here's the potential solution for this. Well, actually, let me show, like, this is the natural way, and this is Ronnie's solution, is to just simply say, okay, set scroll position to top, and here we'll say set scroll position to bottom. And then here we'll accept scroll position. And then we'll have a React use layout effect that, yeah, if the scroll position is top, then we'll just do this. And then else if the scroll position is bottom, and we could switch on that if you wanted to. Some people really like their switch statements. And let's wrap that. There we go. Okay, cool. So now this is using state to manage this, and check it out. We can scroll to top, scroll to bottom, but here's the problem. We scroll to top and then we scroll down and we want to scroll to top again. It's not going to work because we didn't change the state. And so like we didn't actually trigger a re-render. We said set scroll position to top, and it's like, oh, well, that wasn't a re-render or anything. So I guess I'm not going to scroll to top. To make matters worse, if we were to make another, if we were to make another state change, like add a message, look, I scrolled to the top. We keep adding messages. I'm going to scroll to the top. I scroll down. I add another message. We scroll to the top again. So that's not good. You really only want to change the scroll position if this changes. So we add that to the dependency array, and we fix that. So we come over here. And then I scroll to the top, I scroll down, click on scroll to the top again. That's not going to work. But at least with our most recent change, now we won't scroll back to the top again. So that's nice. We fixed that. But yeah, there's still, we need to have some sort of way to say, hey, like, no, they just click scroll to top. I want you to perform this action. So there are a couple of ways that you could solve this. But yeah, one way that I don't like, but it works, is we could actually, instead of setting it to a string, we could set it to an object. So all the reason that it's not working is we're setting the state to the same thing that it is, the same thing it is already. And so there's no re-render that's happening, okay? So what we need to do is we need to set it to an object or to something that changes so that we trigger a re-render and so that this scroll position value itself changes so that we trigger this use effect callback, okay? So if we change this to be an object instead, so we'll just set that to an empty object. We could say, I don't know, you could do it whatever you want. We could say top is true. Not advisable. Like I said, I'm not suggesting this API. But yeah, so now it's an object. And so then we can say scroll position dot top. There we go. Or scroll position dot bottom. Now this should work. So we go scroll to the top, scroll down, scroll to the top again. And that gives me my declarative API. I hate it. Yeah, I would not recommend this as an API you expose. Now, I'm not a super big fan of the imperative API either, but at least it's not like, oh, you have to make sure that it's this object. And I mean, I guess you could say that. Yeah, if that's what you wanted, that's how you wanted to roll. I'm sure there are other ways, but those are the concerns that you need to think about when you're building something like this. Is okay, we need to make sure that a re-render actually happens, and yeah, because the problem is, and the reason why this is so complicated is because the state value is not tracking the state of the UI. Like the UI falls out of sync with the state that you're managing. So you're managing the scroll position, like whether it's top or bottom. And so what really you should be managing is the actual scroll top value. Okay, so you could store that in state or something and just make sure that you're keeping your state updated. And anytime your managed state updates, you just set the scroll top to whatever that is. But then you have to do all of the extra work of managing scroll position and stuff, which yeah, I don't think is all that useful. But I don't know. I'm not doing anything. Let's just do this for fun and implement that. I'm again not recommending this, but let's try this. So instead of scroll position, I'm going to make a new one called scroll top. And our initial scroll top will be 0. And then we'll pass this as a prop. So scroll top. And scroll top. And then we'll use this use layout effect to say container ref current scroll top, oops, equals the scroll top prop. Scroll top prop, scroll top. Okay, so now we're synchronizing our scroll top with whatever that value comes from in state. And so this is going to make it really difficult for us anytime there's some state updated. But anyway, that did not behave as I expected. Hold on a second. So if I scroll down and I make a state change, I would expect it to scroll back to the top, but that is not what's happening. Because this runs scroll top should, oh, because it's not changing. Aha, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So anyway, now we just need to make sure that we are tracking that scroll top value over time. And so let's see, we need to add an event handler for the scroll position, which means, you know what, I don't want to do this. I'll just explain all the things that you'd have to do this. And you can go run off and do it yourself if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it. Go do something useful. But what we'd have to do is we'd need to pass some ref to this container or some, maybe this could add a use effect so that it can listen to the container ref scroll. And then we could have an on scroll prop here in this message display. So we'd say like on scroll. And then in here, we would update the scroll top in that on scroll. For the heck of it, let's just do it. So let's see, on scroll is, the scroll, or let's see, we could do the element. No, let's just do scroll and set scroll top to the scroll. Okay. And then in here, we'd actually do on scroll. Is that a thing? Yeah, that's a thing. Here's our element, and we'd say on scroll element scroll top. I'm guessing that should work. Let's see what happens here. And actually, let's do a console log in here to scroll top, and let's get rid of this scroll position nonsense. So our set scroll top now, this is going to be 0, and this one would be, I guess, infinity. Sure. Okay, here we go. So we've got 0 as our scroll top. Oh man, no dice. This should get our element, and then scroll top is not getting us what we want it to for some reason. That's where those undefineds are coming from, I think. And actually those, it should be calling our scroll top handler. Bummer. On scroll, on scroll. I'm not sure what's going on here. I'm not going to spend too much longer on this. I have other things I want to do today, but let's just CL. Let's do console.dir. You can get properties there. Oh, right. Silly me. That's an event. Target event. There we go. Okay. So now I scroll. There we go. Bum-ba-da-dum. So my scroll is triggering re-renders. Again, I would not recommend this, but because of the way that we've implemented it, man, setting it to infinity does not do it. I guess we'd have to find some way to know how tall it is and set the scroll top to, or yeah, how much scroll there is, and then take that minus how tall it is. That's interesting. What if I set it to like a really high number, not infinity? Scroll top is like 200. Okay, that's weird. I would expect infinity would work also. If I do really big number, that works. Huh. What if it's infinity? That does not work. That's weird. What if we do, number max value? That's what I want, right? That work? Nope. Huh. Very strange. Okay, well, anyway, you could just do, because this isn't something that I would recommend anyway, just do a ridiculously big number so you don't have to worry about finding out how tall it is. And there you go. That should work. Let's just do that just for fun. Just really big number. And now we've got our nice declarative API. Scroll to top, scroll to bottom, scroll around, scroll to bottom, and scroll to bottom again. So there you go. That's what it costs to do a declarative API for something like this. You have to manage the state, which means that you have to trigger, re-renders anytime somebody scrolls. I mean, React is pretty fast, so there's that. But anyway, hopefully that was at least interesting and sort of fun. But I would go with the imperative API instead. Oh, let me save this. Yeah, overwrite. And now let's reset that. There we go. I think the imperative API makes a lot more sense. Okay, that was fun. Let's see if there's any last things before I take off. I'm already way over on my time today, but let's just see. Okay, yeah, fun. thanks for the question and the diversion. And now I'm going to take off. Hope you're all having an awesome day, and we'll see you. I'll probably live stream today. I'm not sure. But I'd like to work on Remix some more. I didn't really get to do that as much as I wanted to last week. So yeah, thanks for hanging out. And I am going to delete the YouTube video, the recording of this, because it's on the wrong channel, and I will upload it to my right channel. So yeah, that's what I get for naming my business channel the same as my personal channel. I got to do something to make that more obvious that that's different. Okay, thanks everybody. We'll see you all in the future. Let me get this screen sharing stopped, and we'll turn off the live stream. Goodbye, live stream viewers. And goodbye, Zoomers. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you on Thursday.